Okay, moving right along, we have another speaker. She writes for the Hamden Chronicle. She comes every year to the Holocaust Observance Program. Her name is Chaya Blitzer, and she has an extraordinary story to tell you. It's called Finding Dina, a Holocaust Miracle. Chaya Blitzer.
I recall,
Hold the mic down.
I recall my mother taking me to a movie, The Search, when I was a child, and it affected me very deeply and has continued to do so throughout all of my life. I recall my mother and other Holocaust survivors deeply stirred by this story about a little boy rescued from a concentration camp, now in a post-war displaced persons camp, separated from his mother, who has been searching for him throughout Europe to find her precious lost child. Traumatized from his Holocaust experiences, he runs away, and unbeknownst to his mother, is befriended by two American soldiers who nurture this troubled waif in their home, unaware that his mother has been desperately searching for him. Upon arriving at the displaced persons camp, asking if her child was there, she is told that several children had recently run away, and one child has drowned, leaving only his wool-red striped cap bobbing in the water. She recognizes the hat as that of her son and weeps for the child she has lost. Although advised to give up her search, she stubbornly resists. I know I'll find him. I feel he is alive. I won't ever give up. Through the fateful twists and turns of the story, after months of searching, miraculously, she and her child are reunited. Throughout her search, she had never given up hope in finding her son. I believe it was the powerful effect which this movie had upon me as a young child, which inspired me to never give up hope in finding my cousin Dina, no matter how many dead ends I had to surmount during my lifelong search for her. She was born in Berlin, 1938, to my Aunt Meri, Miriam, while flames of the Holocaust grew in intensity. By 1939, Aunt Meri feared imminent deportation to a concentration camp. Realizing that babies were the first to be slaughtered, she decided to do all in her power to save Dina's life, and made the very difficult decision to give her up for adoption to an English couple who would take Dina back to England with them so that she could survive. A mother's loving sacrifice. I am reminded of the story of Moses' mother, Yocheved, placing her infant son, Moses, into a basket on the Nile River to enable him to survive an ancient Holocaust, the extermination determined by the Egyptian pharaoh to kill every male child. In late 1939, my mother, who had emigrated to America, received a letter from her beloved sister, Meri, in Berlin. Translated. I am sad to write that I gave up my baby Dina for adoption to a nice English couple who will take her back with them to England. I had to do this so that Dina will live. 3 years later, in 1942, my Aunt Meri, her husband, and their 2-year-old boy, Salo, were deported to a concentration camp in Riga, Latvia, where they were all killed. My mother was the sole survivor of her family. Her parents, 2 brothers, 3 sisters, and 2 nieces succumbed in the brutal death camps. All through her life, my mother will lament. My whole family was killed, and there was only one survivor, Dina, who lived. Why can't we find her? We had gone from pillar to post in many efforts to locate Dina. Since my grandparents, 3 aunts, and 2 uncles had all perished before I was born, I never knew what it was like to have a grandmother, to be hugged and loved by her, nor aunts and uncles to dandle me on their knee and sing lullabies. I felt I was robbed of the special love they could give me. My family consulted attorneys in England who might help us find Dina. We were overjoyed to receive a copy of her birth certificate, but no other leads. I appealed to the German government to open the sealed adoption papers from Berlin to help us find Dina. But we were mired in a bureaucracy which insisted that these records could not be opened, no matter how much we beseeched and despaired. I was at the brink of giving up our desperate, lifelong search for our beloved Dina, when again, that powerful movie, The Search, reverberated within me with its urgent message: never give up, never lose hope. So I continued my search for her. The computer became my ally as I wandered the web, grasping at any hint of Dina's whereabouts. Still no result. Then, in 2006, I discovered a website for the Kindertransport Association, a worldwide organization comprised of children rescued from the Holocaust by very caring English people who traveled to Germany, largely during the period from about 1938 to 1939-40, to take these waifs back with them to England, where the children were either adopted or cared for, in the hope that they would be reunited with their parents when the war was over. Those children who were unfortunately became orphans as their parents succumbed in the death camps were later adopted by very loving English families. From information I found from the Kindertransport Association, I discovered the name and founder of its president, who had been a Kindertransport child herself, rescued some 70 years ago, Mrs. Bertha Leverton. After I had contacted her, she phoned me from England, a warm and very caring person, giving me valuable information for my search for Dina, and suggested I add my search for Dina and pertinent details to the 2006 online Kindertransport newsletter, which I did. Later, Mrs. Leverton, now in her 80s, made a line to Israel, where she currently resides with her daughter, Meri. Now, 2011, 5 years went by. Without any response to the query about Dina I had placed in the Kindertransport newsletter in 2006. But still, I have not given up hope. I continue to Google Dina, pray to find Dina, haunt the internet for Dina. Suddenly, in February of this year, 2011, I received an email with the title, "We think we have found your Dina. Chuck and Robin from Canada." I couldn't believe it. It was too surreal. Thinking that this might be some sort of scam, I did not open this email for several days. Then I took the plunge, and what a plunge it was, into the dark, mysterious depth of over half a century to discover a most precious part of my family I had never known but longed for. Out of the fire of the Holocaust, a sacred spark of life, an ember with a light which refused to be extinguished, my precious cousin Dina. An ember, my precious cousin Dina. And now, her son Charles, who had been desperately searching for me for all of his life, discovered a branch of his family tree, which had survived and has flourished. Quote, "I knew my mother Dina had been adopted," he said, "and her mother, my grandmother Meri, had surrendered her to my adoptive grandparents so that Dina could live," he wrote. I visualized his grandparents carrying Marie's baby toward the Berlin train, which would take them to their home in England and life. Marie, ultimately bound for a death camp, knew her child would live, and that sustained her through the oncoming flames. Many emails and phone calls strengthened our bonds. Charles wrote in a recent letter, quote, "Finding and meeting you has been the greatest gift I've ever received or will receive. As for myself, all my life, I wanted to see Dina's face. What did she look like? Who in her family did she resemble?" Several weeks later, I received a very precious package from Charles and his wife, Robin, a photograph of Dina, a portrait of her at age 18. I was overwhelmed at the strong resemblance she and I shared, the large dark eyes and the other similar features. Jeans, from Berlin to Brooklyn to Connecticut, dancing on the branches of our family tree. Charles, the image of my grandfather. Dina, my mother's eyes, her nose, her lips. Jeans, traversing the high wire of centuries. Charles and I, sharing many similar hobbies and interests, connecting us like an embrace through generations. I am so thankful for this most precious gift. Charles and I finding each other after my half-century of searching, a Holocaust miracle. The many years of his yearning to know, who is my grandmother, Meri? What was she like? And my great-grandfather and great-grandmother. God had unveiled a new loving family for me and for Charles. Dina, his mother, and my first cousin had unfortunately passed away before our recent reunion. But she lives on through Charles, with whom he shares a strong resemblance. Her lovely portrait now graces my home, and her radiant spirit and beauty remind me of this miracle which God has performed, uniting a family torn asunder by the Shoah, now glowing with the love they have found. I consider Charles' adoptive grandparents, who were Jewish, courageous and loving, as they traveled through the flames of Berlin to rescue a baby bound for a death camp. As they left, my Aunt Meri took one last look at her baby Dina, swaddled in a warm blanket, never to see her again, but knowing her child would receive the greatest gift, life. The word angel in Hebrew, malach, which means agent, an agent of God. I believe that this couple acted as angels in rescuing Dina. And in conclusion, I'd like to quote Mr. Jussi Refson, describing the astounding rescue of his grandmother at Auschwitz. Quote, "If Jewish history has proven one irrefutable fact, it's that the soul of a faithful people cannot be vanquished by those driven to destroy that which is good and right in this world. Auschwitz showed us that just as man can sink as low as the basest animal, so can he rise to the level of angels." And Dina's portrait, her photograph, is on the table for anyone who wants to look at it. Thank you.
What a marvelous story.
Great story. Thank you.
I don't think there's a dry eye in the audience. That was unbelievable that you made contact with your family. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for allowing me to share.
Thank
Thank you. Thank you.
I now have